Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us for another edition of Coffee and Conversation. I think everybody probably knows me by now, but just in case, I'm Dana Saunders. I'm the director of the Students First Office here at UNCG in the Division of Student Success, and I'm also the chair this year for the University Advising Council. And one of my duties is to coordinate and deliver our Coffee and Conversation advisor roundtable series. So I think we've had a great year with lots of different topics covered in Coffee and Conversation. And we're going out with a bang this week with our final two in 2 days, starting today with a regroup and review of our academic relief package as we prepare for the end of the semester and supporting our students in what is hopefully the last and final academic relief package ever at UNCG. I'm just going to put that out into the universe. So if you haven't had a chance already, please be sure to sign in. I'll keep putting the link in the chat. For those of you who are just joining today, I know there are lots of things happening at UNCG today, and so I appreciate those of you who've elected to come to this event. We're competing against provost candidates. I know there's also FYE 101 training for our new instructors going on right now. So if you have colleagues who weren't able to be here today, please know that as always, we're recording this session today, and we'll make both the video and the slides and the resources that we talk about in our conversation today available on the Advisors Academy website. My goal is to get that up for everybody by the end of the week. So by the end of the day tomorrow, and I'll be sure to send that out far and wide. So please, if you've got colleagues who express concern that they couldn't be here today, just know that they'll have access to these resources later. But appreciate those of you who are joining this morning. I think that is everything before we get started here. So I am doing double duty this morning as both moderator and facilitator as we again regroup and review and prepare for the launch of our spring 2021 version of the academic relief package. So I'll present lots of information today, but at any point, if you've all got questions, please do not hesitate to turn on your video, unmic yourself, and ask away at any time as we're talking through things this morning. I will also keep one eye on the chat, but if I miss your question, I appreciate those of you who will help me ensure that I'm not missing anything. Sound like a plan? All right, everybody. Well, I hope you got your coffee. I'm 2 cups in already. So let me go ahead and share my screen and we'll get started. Let's see here. All right, can somebody give me a thumbs up that you're seeing what you're supposed to be seeing? So not my notes, not the print. Perfect. Thank you very much. You just never know with Zoom, do you? All right, so obviously we all know why we're here today. I've said it a couple of different times, but we're prepping for the final launch of, again, what is hopefully the last academic relief package ever at UNCG. There has been no talk at all about a summer 2021 package or certainly a fall 2021 package, and let's just keep it that way as we strive to get back to normal. I think our students and our faculty and us as advisors, we've done everything we can over what I know has been a very challenging 18 months. And so I know we're looking forward to continuing to work to get back to normal academic life, whatever that maybe is now. So here's what we're going to talk through today. We'll start with a super quick review of what the components are of the spring 2021 academic relief package. There are not really very many substantial differences to the components themselves from fall 2020. So we'll dust off the cobwebs and just refamiliarize ourselves with that real quick. We'll cover some important ARP timeline, deadlines, and resources. Again, the resources that hopefully were very helpful to you all as advisors and also to our students last semester will continue this semester. So we'll just reorient ourselves to that. We'll talk about what I think are some pretty substantial updates to our advisor review plan based on the experiences that we had with the review plan in the fall, and trying to be more responsive to what we know is of most help to our students. So we'll definitely spend some time diving into that today. And hopefully you all will be both relieved and happy with some of the updates that we've got planned that we'll share. We'll talk through a little bit those scenarios where we as advisors would be advising students to opt in or opt out of the ARP, and sort of revisit those scenarios and any questions you all might have. And then we'll wrap up and talk about final steps and revisit sort of what options are out there for students before, during, and after those ARP deadlines when things are sort of officially coming to an end. Sound like a plan, everybody? All right. Okay, so let's quickly review the spring 2021 academic relief plan components. The main thing that we're going to be focusing on over the next couple of weeks is that limited opt-in that exists for students with satisfactory, unsatisfactory grading. Nothing about this changes from what was offered in fall 2020. So students who have a C+ or above in a course can opt into a satisfactory grade. With an essay grade, they do earn credit, so they maintain that credit just as if they'd kept their letter grade. The difference is obviously that an essay grade does not factor into their GPA. Students who've earned a D+ or below can transition to an unsatisfactory grade. Hopefully we're all remembering, including students themselves, that an unsatisfactory grade means no credit is earned. So even if they earned a D+ or a D or a D- where they would normally earn credit hours and earn credit towards a requirement, whatever requirement that course was fulfilling, if they opt into a US or unsatisfactory grade, remember that that is essentially the equivalent of a withdrawal in terms of credit purposes. It protects their GPA from perhaps a lower than what they wanted or desired grade, but it also means no credit earned. And that always seems to be an interesting sticking point that I think students are starting to get now that we're several semesters into a relief package, but certainly very important to remind them of. The 2 course credit maximum is really important to remember. So again, 2 courses only. Sorry, I'm going to bring up the chat right here as we're talking. Give me just one sec. Probably can't see the chat as I'm presenting, so that may be a problematic here in just a minute, but I'll see if I can troubleshoot that in just a sec. So just remember that there's a 2 course maximum for up to 8 hours, but really the starting point is 2 courses and 2 courses only. And I also want to point out that there remains that program discretion for if a satisfactory grade meets requirements. We have a handful of programs at UNCG who have elected to not allow a satisfactory grade to fulfill a major requirement or program requirement or prerequisite. There are not very many, but it's important for the students who are enrolled in those programs. And I know those programs are doing a really good job at communicating that proactively to students. But that is also a continuation of what happened or what was adopted in fall 2020. Questions about any of that so far? Let me see if I can figure out how to show my chat. There we are. Sorry, did I misspeak on the satisfactory, unsatisfactory grade? It looks like in the chat there was a question about a satisfactory grade includes a C-, and that is correct. So a C- or above is a satisfactory, can be transitioned to a satisfactory grade. A D+ or below is an unsatisfactory grade. That's the option for students. All right, great. So let's go back here. The other important, or I think just reminder about our spring 2021 academic relief package components has to do with withdrawals, but is different from what was offered a little bit in fall 2020. But that is that any withdrawals that students completed on their own prior to the posted deadline to withdraw without academic penalty are automatically posted on the transcript as a WE grade. WE grades are significant and different from what we normally see in terms of WX grades because they are excluded from GPA calculations and also excluded from the 16-hour course withdrawal limit that's normally in place for our academic course withdrawal policy at UNCG. So for our normal 16-week courses, obviously this deadline was back on March 15th, and students should already be seeing all of those WE grades on their transcripts if they did elect to withdraw before that deadline. And then last but not least, there continues to be grade replacement flexibility for students. Essentially, for any courses that they have taken starting back in spring 2020, continuing through summer 2020, fall 2020, and now spring 2021, all of those courses, if they elect to retake them and use grade replacement in the future, that grade replacement would be excluded from the normal 3-course limit that exists in our current grade replacement policy. So students have a lot of flexibility there. Any questions about the components?
Dana, I have a question.
Yeah.
So on the ARP website, it doesn't list summer 2020. Is that included in flexibility or no?
Good question. The reason that it was not included is because it was originally, the grade replacement flexibility actually was something that was handed down to us by the UNC system office. And in their original guidance, it did not include summer 2020 as a semester where that flexibility was offered. So it's not included on the website right now because we were awaiting clarification and confirmation. We've gotten that and have adopted that at UNCG in our practice. So the website just needs to be updated. But moving forward, yes, essentially from spring 2020 all the way through spring 2021, that grade replacement flexibility continues to exist. Does that help?
Yes, thanks. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to make a note to make sure we add summer 2020 back to the website.
Dana, this is Adam in the Bryan School.
Hey, Adam.
Any caveats or exclusions for winter session this year like there was last year?
Good question. Yeah. So the short answer is no, there's no caveats or exclusions. The reason why winter term and part of term 1 were excluded from our relief package in spring 2020 is because COVID hadn't happened yet. And we didn't know what the impact was going to be on our students. And so those parts of the semester had essentially already concluded before COVID began to wreak havoc on our academic community. But but that obviously is not the case in terms of spring 2021. So regardless of whatever part of term students have taken courses in this spring, the academic relief package applies to them.
Thanks.
Hey, Dana.
Yeah.
This is Christina from the Department of Public Health Education.
Hey.
I just had a question. Hey, could you explain grade replacement flexibility? I'm sure it's somewhere where I can read it in more detail, but what do you mean by that as far as flexibility, that they can go above the 3-course limit?
Exactly.
Okay.
So if they are retaking and replacing courses that they originally took during COVID times from spring 2020 to spring 2021, it won't deduct from the normal 3-course limit that's in place for our policy. So they could do 4. They could technically do more than 4, but
Okay.
Does that help?
Yes, okay. I wanted to make sure I understood how flexible or,
Right.
okay, thank
Yep.
you.
Essentially, any course that they're retaking and replacing that they originally took during the last 3 semesters are excluded from that 3-course limit.
Dana, this
Gotcha.
is Ann Barton from the residential colleges.
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm good.
Good. I have a question about the 8 hours.
Mhm.
This came up last semester. Does a course that has a co-requisite lab like Chemistry 111 and 112 count as one course or 2 courses? Because it's only 4
If
hours.
the co-requisite itself has credit, so it's not a 0 credit course, but it's like a 1 credit lab that's required with the 3 credit hour course, and a student gets a grade for both of those components, then each of those would count as one. The lecture would be 1 course, and the co-requisite lab that they got a separate grade in would be the second. But they could replace they could opt into the grade that they got for the lecture, but keep the original grade for their lab if they so chose.
Right. Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Good questions. All right, so let's quickly talk about what's not included, just to sort of flip this on its head. So obviously, similar to fall, no limitless opt-ins for SAUS grading. That's something that we had in place last spring and last summer. So again, that 2-course up to 8-hour limit. There's also no extended deadline to resolve incomplete grades that might be awarded for spring 2021. This is also the same from the fall semester, but I think kind of got lost in the shuffle, especially last semester. So we had last spring and summer extended the deadline to resolve incomplete grades to 12 months instead of the normal 6-month time frame. But we did not do that in fall, and we are not doing that again this spring. So we've returned to the normal 6-month time frame. That's the case again for fall. That will also be the case for any incomplete grades awarded in the spring. I don't know what the deadline for spring 2021 will be off the top of my head, but I think it will be next November sometime. And that will be communicated out to any faculty who award incomplete grades and also any students who continue to have incomplete grades on their record. One thing that is not included in spring 2021 that is different from fall 2020 is that we will not have any kind of expedited course withdrawal request process for students who elect to take WF grades. So they withdrew or have withdrawn from courses after the deadline to withdraw without GPA penalty and have WFs on their transcript. In the fall, we offered an expedited course withdrawal request because the academic relief package for fall was announced so late and may have impacted students' choices had they known that it was coming sooner. But because our academic relief package for this spring has existed from day one, from the very beginning, there won't be that expedited course withdrawal request. So there's still our normal course withdrawal request process for any students that have WF grades or other grades that they want to retroactively withdraw from, but not an expedited review. Questions about that? Okay, great. So let's talk timeline. That are mapped out here. So I sort of officially start the ARP clock with the deadline for final grades from our faculty, which is Monday, May 10th, 5 p.m. specifically. So I think the grading is turned on right now, but will remain open until 5 p.m. on May 10th. We built in a little extra time between that final grade to due deadline and when ARP will eventually open for students. You'll see there that ARP will not open for students in UNC Genie until May 12th. That is a little bit different from the fall because we had some lessons learned in the fall in how important the academic standing notifications would be to students that will go out the day after the final grade deadline. So May 10th is the final grade to due deadline. May 11th is when preliminary academic standing notifications will be sent to students. This is part of our normal end of term process. They are only sent to students who are essentially in bad academic standing. So they're on academic warning, probation, suspension, or dismissal. And really is intended to give students, to direct students to the benefits of utilizing the academic relief package for those who need it most. We did not have that flexibility with our timeline in the fall, and I think it caused some confusion both for us as advisors and for students, because by the time they got their academic standing notifications, the ARP was already turned on, and the information they were getting about their standing was already kind of outdated, or at least in conflict with their GPA and other things. So we've stretched it out a little bit in that final grades will be due on the 10th. And I see the comment in the chat that this is different for 7-week courses. So thanks for pointing that out, Paige. You're right that this is the sort of full semester 16-week deadline and the last deadline for, I think, for courses for spring 2021. So final grades due on the 10th. Preliminary academic standing notifications will be sent on the 11th. That the 11th is also when we will launch what I'm terming our proactive advisor outreach. So more on that to come. And then on the 12th, specifically at 12 midnight, the academic relief package will become available for students to begin opting into through UNC Genie. It will remain open for exactly 2 weeks from May 12th through May 26th. And during this time, I know we'll be doing lots of work as advisors in guiding students' choices, doing some review of students' choices. And so that will continue. Our any advisor review that we are conducting, and again, we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute, will officially need to conclude on May 28th. And then on June 1st is when there's the opt-out deadline for students. And so by opting out, I mean, maybe they've gotten guidance that they've not made the best choices and perhaps they should reconsider their original grade. So we'll review the process for how students can request that. That date, June 1st, is also when updated final academic standing notifications will be sent to students, again, from the registrar's office. They will be sent to any students who have restored good standing. So maybe they moved from a bad standing, whatever that might be, to a good standing, and also any students who continue officially on warning, probation, suspension, or dismissal. And then our academic suspension and dismissal appeal deadline will come up 10 days later on June 10th. I see a couple questions in the chat. Let's see, Eleanor asks, if a student on probation uses ARP to keep their GPA up but falls below 67% completion, will they be suspended? That's a great question, Eleanor. No, they will not. They may continue on academic warning because that 67% completion rate for courses that they have attempted or their hours that they have attempted this semester may result in them being on academic warning, but that would not impact their eligibility to enroll. They'd be able to continue their enrollment. Does that make sense? Great. Any questions about the timeline here?
This is Adam again. The updated academic standing, that's just a notice that it'll update automatically in the system, right? So like if they're wanting to do summer school and they change their opt-in on May the 12th, they'll still be able, if they go from suspended back to continued probation, they'll be able to take summer classes without waiting for that update in June.
Good question. Yeah, the short answer is yes. Now their academic standing will not update in the system to reflect their ARP choices until June 1st, which is when we will press the buttons. We registrars gurus will press the buttons run academic standing, it will recalculate based on their ARP selections. And then the email notification will get sent out. You're right, it's a courtesy notification. So students will not see their academic standing update in Genie in real time. They will see their GPA update in real time. And that was the case in all of our semesters. But because we know that there's overlap between the end of spring, the beginning of summer, and ARP, students will remain eligible to take summer courses. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yep.
Okay, great. Good questions. Okay, so I'll just quickly remind folks of the helpful, what I hope are helpful resources that exist out there for both you and students that you can use now on our Academic Relief Package website. There have been, all of these existed for you all and for students in the fall as well. So if you haven't had a chance to sort of refamiliarize yourself with those, I would definitely encourage you to do so. But we've got, and I can click on any and talk through any if you've got any questions, but we've got our sort of quick guide of a letter grade versus SAUS grading. And this is a quick resource. Can you all see this if I click here? Let's see. Can you see this opening, or can you only see my slides?
Still only see your slides right now.
Just see your slides.
Okay. Hang on one sec. Now I think you can maybe see the letter grade versus satisfactory, unsatisfactory grading. Yes, no, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah, we can see it.
Thank you. So this will talk both advisors and students through essentially what we would recommend in broad streaking strokes based on what their original letter grade was, and sort of the benefits or the consequences of opting into an SA or a US grade. So that exists. We also have our ARP decision tree that essentially walks students or advisors through a series of questions based on their academic standing, what their original grade was, what program they're involved in. And I know that that was a really popular resource for advisors and students last semester. The GPA calculator and FAQs still exist. I know those FAQ documents are dense. Particularly, there's a student version and then there's an advisor facing version, but probably if you've got a question, it's in there, or if it's not in there, it should be. But don't hesitate to reach out to me if you feel like you've got a nuanced question there as well. We've also got our list of academic programs that are prohibiting an SA grade based, or in other words, will not accept the SA grade as meeting a major or program requirement or prerequisite. That list has changed just slightly. There are no additions, but there have been a couple of departments that have decided, you know what, we're going to go ahead and continue to accept the SA grade as fulfilling requirements. So be sure to check that out as that updates. That is reflective of that most up-to-date information. And then we've got step-by-step instructions for students, including screenshots in UNC Genie, and that was added to the website this week, so is already out there for students. Anything that we want to talk through in more detail before we talk about the advisor review component and plan? I've lost the chat again and all my screen sharing. So if you all have got questions, please don't hesitate to unmic or somebody call my attention to the chat. So ever since we've started our ARP first started ARP last spring, we kind of have these two sometimes competing phases of what I would call ARP advising. We've had our proactive advisor outreach, which is really where we focused our energies, I think, last spring and summer. It was more informal. We were reaching out to students, really just trying to encourage as many students as possible to take advantage of the relief package and assisting as questions arose. In the fall, we moved to a more, I know we all remember this, responsive and sort of reactive advisor review. And that was prompted by, I think, student concerns and maybe advisor concerns as well, that of students making bad choices, opting in when it wasn't necessary, or not necessarily thinking through the longer term impacts of continued multiple semesters of opting into the academic relief package. And was also reflective of the desires of our provost at the time. So let's take a quick look at how that went. And I think I've shared this previously, but just to give you a sense of things. So in the fall, we had just over 2,700 total undergraduates opt into SA-US grades. That was, most students opted into at least two their full 2 courses that were offered, that they were permitted to do so with the academic relief package. So there were a total of 4,200 total grades reviewed by advisors. I want to say that I was truly amazed and impressed at our ability and our collective efforts for the advisor review, because that is a lot of records and there was a lot of nuance in there. There were, obviously, the review was prompted by concern that students were making bad choices, but in the end, that wasn't really the case. We had a very limited number of students who needed advisor review, at least according to the documentation that we maintained centrally. Only about 13% of our students needed advisors to go back and say, hey, I think you made some poor choices. And of those, even fewer actually elected to reverse their original ARP selections anyway, even if that's something that we guided them to do. So of those we reached out to, only about 37% ever even reversed their options. And so because the experience that we saw in the fall really demonstrated that there wasn't the impact of a reactive advisor review, we're going to switch up our approach a little bit and more shift back primarily to the proactive advisor review approach, but this time with a little more structure and coordination, just so we can ensure that all of our students are getting similar kinds of guidance and information, but still allowing for the nuance across programs. So let's talk about what that looks like. So we're going to do this proactive advisor outreach that really will start, unless you all tell me otherwise, immediately following the final grades due deadline, when ideally all of our grades are in. We can have a full picture of what a student's academic success has been like for this spring 2021 semester, with the goal that we want to outreach to the students who would benefit most from opting in to the SA-US grading options. So in the fall, you'll remember that in our sort of responsive advisor review, we shared reports of students as they were opting in. This time, we're going to start with outreach reports of what students' final grades are, with an emphasis on students that have a C, essentially C- or below. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But those will start to be shared with our school and college advising centers on May 11th. That will be shared in a box folder that any and all advisors on campus can have access to, similar again to how we structured things in the fall. So if you were part of that box folder where we maintained those advisor review rosters, you will automatically have access to the proactive advisor outreach reports. If you have concerns that maybe you weren't part of that box folder, or maybe you weren't as involved in the in the ARP options for fall 2020, just don't hesitate to reach out to me or the director of the advising center in your unit. Either of us can add you to that box folder where we will maintain all of these resources. So these proactive advisor outreach reports will look very similar to the review reports that we used in the fall. They'll include all of students' information, the courses that they took, the original grade that they had, if they have financial aid, so that then we can do proactive advisor outreach, again, to those students who would benefit most. And we'll talk about what that means, who should opt in here in just a minute. We'll also include email templates for you all to use as you see fit to adapt them to meet your needs. Again, encouraging students as specifically as possible for how to utilize the academic relief package. Questions about any of this?
Dana, Adam again. Sorry to.
No, you're great. Go ahead.
I know I had students last semester that I noted a recommendation and they didn't follow through with that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if we could add some type of acknowledgement where when they try to opt in, that they either it's a pop-up or just some checkable box that says, because we want you to succeed, your advisor is going to review this. And if we have a recommendation, we want you to know that you'll receive that. And so that they have to acknowledge that they understand that, and maybe that will help them have it on their radar. I think mine that didn't utilize my recommendation probably just didn't know I recommended it, because I'm all online and they just are overwhelmed with the emails. And so maybe that extra layer may help with that responsiveness.
So it sounds like what I'm hearing you ask for is when they're going into UNC Genie and making their selections, some language that reminds them that advisors may be reviewing and have additional feedback. And so they need to be like checking their email. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. Like when you download an app, you have to scroll through it, and at the bottom, click the acknowledgement before you can submit it. Either something like that where they actually have to click that they acknowledge it, or maybe something where once they submit it that they are processing it, there's some type of pop-up with that message. Just some layer that explains what we're doing and why we're doing it is to help them.
I will look into that. I honestly don't know how feasible that will be, but part of me is also like, well, it's really just changing some text, because we do already have built into their steps in UNC Genie sort of these constant warnings of this is, essentially it's like, this is considered final and you won't be able to go back in and make changes, and are you sure you want to proceed? So we might be able to add some text that just says advisors are continuing to review these, exactly what you said. So I'll look into that and report back. I can't promise it, but I do think it's a good idea. And there's maybe mechanisms already in place if we can like tweak the text or the wording a little bit. Okay. Other questions, thoughts, feedback?
I have another thought. This is Christina again, about similar to along those lines about emails being overwhelming for and using Starfish. I don't know how that can be, because we are a fan of how to use our systems the best, and since our advisor listings are in Starfish, that it could just be I don't know how easy that would be to build, but added there in Starfish, so it could just be a click, easy for the student and the advisor, I would think, versus emails back and forth, that Starfish having that place to go, or whether it's in UNC Genie. I appreciate how you all have those warnings built in to UNC Genie, but I was just thinking about efficiency versus email.
Mm-hmm.
I do appreciate having a template though. That will help.
That at least is a step in the right direction. Huh?
Right.
Okay. Yeah. We'll think about that. Oh, you said something, Christina, and it triggered another thought for me.
Mm-hmm. What about Starfish and the
Yeah, it
advisor listing?
flitted right out. Let's see.
Mm,
It may come back to me.
okay.
I'll let it like percolate back there. Okay, that's helpful.
Okay. Thank you.
It's like right on the tip of my brain, but I can't quite remember what I was going to say about that. Okay. So again, the goal here though, is to shift more so to, okay, we know what students' grades are. What would we like to advise them to do proactively before the system actually opens? So that there's sort of more ongoing work on our part in terms of reaching out again to students that would benefit most versus review as much pressure to review after the fact. Oh, and I remembered, Christina, and that is that one of the things we did very late or intermittently, both in the spring and the fall, was utilize notifications through the UNCG app. And I think we're going to continue to do that as well, which I think we could also do to remind them that ARP is open, you should be opting in, but you may also be getting email from your advisor or feedback from advisors if there's any concerns. And so we'll build that into a more robust communication plan this semester as well.
That sounds good. Yeah, that's a good addition. Okay.
Great. Okay, so let's talk about sort of what I would consider the two most specific cases and when it's beneficial to advise students to opt in. First and foremost is when we want to address any kind of academic standing or enrollment eligibility concerns. So less so, honestly, for students who are on academic warning, although they certainly can continue to see their GPA impacted one way or the other, but their academic standing might not change. But for students who are on academic probation or have been received that preliminary notification that they've been placed on academic suspension or dismissal, and opting into an SAUS grading will improve their GPA. These are students that, again, would benefit most. And I put a pro tip reminder there that, remember, it's a 2.0 cumulative GPA is what's needed to maintain academic good standing. And we've continued to see a lot of students over the last couple of semesters be able to return to academic good standing, significantly change their academic standing as a result of opting into the relief package. Or the other option is that if opting in would improve their term GPA to a 2.3 or higher, because that's the sort of interim GPA that they need to maintain to remain eligible to continue their enrollment at UNCG until they return to academic good standing. This is where the the ARP GPA calculator specifically on the ARP website, I think will be very helpful to you all and to students. If you've got questions, of course, we've got our academic recovery team here in the Students First office that is absolutely able to help and sort of is very well versed in the nuances of that as well. But if you are working with students who are sort of in those real high risk academic standing categories, opting in, even though there's still the limit of 2 grades, can sometimes pretty significantly change their trajectory. Questions about that? Keep losing the chat. So if I'm missing anything in the chat, you all let me know. Okay, great.
I'll just comment that
Yeah.
this is, you also have to even consider C's in this for the continued probation. Last semester, I had a student that got 2 C's and they would have been suspended had they not took the advantage of ARP
Mhm.
because their term GPA didn't meet the threshold.
Right.
So you can't just look at the C minuses.
Right, exactly. C's and C minuses can both, they're generally very, those are respectable enough grades. But for our students who are on probation or suspension and dismissal, you're absolutely right. We've got to even go up to the C threshold, because that 2.3 term GPA is really reflective of a C plus grade or above, right? So yeah, that's a really important caveat. Thanks for that, Adam. Any other thoughts or questions about that? Okay, great. And so then the other big scenario is to help a student meet a major requirement or prerequisite. Now, obviously, the caveat to this is that handful of programs that aren't accepting the essay grade as a program, as meeting program requirements or prerequisites. But if a student has earned, I've got a little typo on here, I guess, but earned a C minus grade, but perhaps it's in a course where they need a C or higher to fulfill the requirement, this is a scenario where we definitely would want to advise students to opt in, because it would allow them, assuming they're in a program where that will accept the essay grade, would allow them to continue on and meet requirements and not have to repeat the course to earn a higher letter grade. Questions about that?
There's a couple in the chat.
Oh, I might have to ask y'all to unmic if I can't get my chat window to appear somewhere. Let's see here.
Dana, I can read them to you.
Thank you, Heather.
A couple people were asking if our list will have C grades on it.
Yes, we'll make sure that the list have C grades.
I think the other questions were addressed by other people in the chat.
I think the big
There's
one is about whether the university is putting out some kind of communication to students, because they've become sort of reliant on the ARP, and to let them know that that's over after this semester, like that it's not going to work for summer and moving forward. And I think that's definitely something we've talked about in our office as a concern.
So not so much a communication about that ARP exists for spring 2021, but more so that like it will not exist moving forward.
Yeah, I think that that's the secondary message, right? The first message is obviously to those who really need to use it right now. But then the secondary message is, but also you can't rely on this. It's over. And I mean, I just know that I have a lot of students who have sort of, I mean, think about like students who started last year or even this year, they've never had a non-ARP semester.
A non-ARP term. Yes, exactly. Yep.
So I just think that they're going to be, it's just going to be a little bit of shock for some of those folks.
Yep. No, for sure. Well, and I know that was a concern we talked about a lot when the decision was made to have ARP in the fall even. And here we extended it to from 2 terms to 4 terms with the faculty senate vote. So I think you're right. That will be very important moving forward. And so we'll be sure to facilitate that. I'll work with Dr. Andrew Hamilton, and maybe we can also talk about ways to facilitate that more directly from schools, colleges, departments, advising centers, especially once we get through this season of ARP. Thanks for that.
This is Britt.
Britt.
I was just going to say, and maybe even, I mean, you might already be thinking this, but spelling out what that means, that means they will not be able to take a satisfactory or unsatisfactory grade, because they just don't understand what ARP, means. And then also, just if any of you want to refer any of your students to the nursing department, if they're pursuing nursing, to just verify, what we might not accept or what we would advise for any of their classes. just wanted to offer that.
Thanks for that, Britt. Taking lots of notes, guys, so I appreciate the feedback. Okay. All right, so even though we're really focusing holistically and collectively on a more proactive advisor guidance approach, we will continue with responsive advisor review as needed and where possible. So this is not something that's going to be required for every single unit. So essentially leaving it up to centers and to the schools and colleges and individual departments to figure out what makes the most sense for them. I think it will be really, really important to continue, particularly for those programs that are not accepting the SA grade. The main ones that we saw in the fall for when a reversal was recommended was students who earned A's or B's and essentially gave up a good grade for an essay. And we were like, why are you doing that? Don't do that. And that's, students can make that choice. And then the other one was students that hadn't, paid attention to the guidance from specific programs that said, hey, we're not accepting the essay grade. This will impact your ability to be admitted into our upper division, or like whatever the case may be. And so they needed to reverse for that respect. So again, I think the responsive advisor review after students have made their opt-in selections will continue to be important for those programs, but essentially is much more optional for programs where the essay grade is accepted as is. Does that make sense? Questions? So we'll still continue to provide the advisor review reports for all schools and colleges. Again, very similar to the proactive review and to what we did in the fall. Those will be shared on a rolling basis and will be updated throughout the ARP opt-in period from May 12th through May 26th. On every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you can expect that there will be names added to the rosters for your schools or colleges as students are making those opt-in choices. So we'll put those in Box. Again, if you're concerned that you may not have access to Box, I'll send out a link to that Box when I share the recording of this session, and the PowerPoint slides will also add a direct link to that login on the Advisors Academy website. So if you want to go there and just access everything at once. But if you don't think you've got access, don't hesitate to reach out again, either to me or to the director of the advising center in your school or college, and we'll help get you set up for that. But again, no longer required for all students or for all opt-in selections. So one thing that you may want to do as we're sort of preparing for the launch of ARP is talk with your most immediate colleagues to figure out, okay, what do we need to do? What do we want to do? What do we feel comfortable just leaving up to, students' choices? And see if you want to, how much you want to coordinate from there. Again, and email templates will be available for outreach when or if you do want to advise students to opting back out and reversing their ARP selections. We'll have those for you as well. I suspect that the suggestions for perhaps using Starfish communication and utilizing the app to just remind students that we're looking at these grades, that will continue to apply here as well. So I'll make that note. Questions about the optionality of the responsive advisor review? Anything in the chat? Just double checking.
No, nothing in the chat.
Thank you very much. All right. So let's talk about just a quick review of when you might advise students to reverse course and opt out. I think we've talked about these a little bit, and I know they're sort of at the forefront of our mind, but Certainly, if there's the potential loss of needed credit and or a negative impact to financial aid. So this again is for students that are in good standing, which you will know because it will be on your reports, opted into a US grade, but their original grade was passing, so a D plus, a D, or a D minus. And again, all of that information will be included on the reports that will be made available to you by school and college. Also, if there's any kind of concern about a potential delay in time to degree, I think essentially this, again, is sort of the biggest risk for those programs that have elected to exclude essay grades from meeting requirements. So if that applies to you, that's something that you definitely want to be looking for in the advisor review. And then the potential loss of good grades. I sort of heard anecdotally from a lot of you all that that was sort of a difficult one to try to explain and like convince students of when we did our advisor outreach in the fall. So I suspect that maybe will continue, but essentially if students have earned good letter grades, A grades and B grades, including the plus or minus, but then have elected to opt into an essay grade, those are always the ones that make me cringe a little bit. I know make us all cringe, and we just don't know or are concerned about the long-term impacts of that, again, over multiple semesters. Questions about any of this, about the opting scenarios where we want to advise students to opt back out?
Dana, I had a quick question, and this is Kristen. I understand if this might not be logistically possible, but would there be any way on that report that's shared out to indicate if a student is on like financial aid warning, to know if there was any immediate kind of danger of financial aid credit or financial aid impact through credit loss?
I think the answer to that is no, but I will consult with our colleagues in the financial aid office to see if their thoughts on that guidance have changed. I think gotcha. When we talked about and built the reports in the fall, the consensus was we really just wanted to start with broadly sharing if students have financial aid or not, and then refer those, if we're concerned that there might be a financial aid concern, refer them to the financial aid office specifically if that's not something that we as advisors felt comfortable addressing. But I'll revisit and make sure that their feelings on that has not changed. Does that sound okay?
Sounds good. Thanks.
Very non-committal of me.
Yeah, I know we can also do individual checks in Banner and Rowastat, but I didn't know if that was something that could be easily built in or not.
Right. Well, and those are screens that not everybody has access to. So I will talk to financial aid about that.
Dana, this is Megan. I was gonna mention too, if any of the advisors have questions about that specifically, if the student's at risk of being on SAP because of, the academic relief, y'all are welcome to contact me directly too. My name is Megan Barton and I'm in the financial aid office and I do the SAP appeals. So, you're welcome to reach out to me on chat or email. If you have a question specifically about a student, I don't mind to answer it.
Thank you, Megan.
You're welcome.
Dana,
I thought you might be crashing this morning, but I wasn't sure if you were out there or not. So thanks for joining us and figuring out all this, because certainly there are absolutely
no problem
impacts for sure.
Dana, I thought of a question. It's not about reversal, but I thought I should ask it before I forget.
Go for it. Yep.
I know last semester it was a one opportunity to do any type of opt-in. Is that still the case, or can they do one here, one there, anytime in that 2-week period?
Good question. There is one opportunity and one opportunity only. So they have to know all their grades and be fully ready to make either the 1 or 2 course choice, because once they click submit, the option to do anything else in UNCG ends. So they get the one submission and the one submission only.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Dana, just to inquire, will students be able to appeal, reverse their decision after that May 26th deadline or 28th deadline passes?
Yes, let's talk about that. Perfect segue, Jennifer Clark. Thank you for that. So there will, similar to what we had in fall 2020, for those of you who are involved in this last semester, there will continue to be an opt-out process. So again, for students who submitted in UNC Genie, perhaps without consultation or in a flurry of activity, have received outreach from you all that perhaps their choices were not the best choices. So that will still continue, even though our advisor review may not be as robust for spring 2021. I should have looked and reminded myself how many students. Well, I guess I said that number earlier, but essentially opted back out and submitted an ARP reversal. But students will have until 5 p.m. on June 1st to reverse course and submit a request to opt back out of their ARP selections and essentially revert back to the original letter grades that they earned in either one or two courses, depending on what they're trying to take. If they take no action, so they submitted their request, maybe you reached out, maybe you didn't, but they decide that, they don't submit anything, then the SAUS grades will remain on their academic transcript and cannot be reversed. But opt-out requests will come to the Division of Student Success, and the registrar's office will work jointly on those via this ARP reversal request form, which is hyperlinked here. We can look at it if y'all want to. It will also be included in the email templates for you all to use as you are working with students. But students will need to submit that request, and then we will manually update their records. So it takes a couple days. Of course, then there's GPA impacts and like manual changes to their academic standing as well. But that option does continue to exist for students.
Dana, this is Nancy. I wanted to ask a question about this opt-out process.
Sure.
So if a student, if in reviewing what the student has opted into, we see that they should have opted to different courses and different outcomes. So like maybe they opted for a US for an F in a general education class, but they did that for 2 classes, but then they had C minuses that they could have opted to essays, which would allow them to progress to the major.
There.
Can they use the opt-out process to switch, to do a switcheroo, or can they only undo what they originally opted for?
That's a great question. So the ARP reversal is really intended just to reverse, not to change. But students ended up requesting changes anyway, and we evaluated those on a case-by-case basis and prioritized exactly what you said, Nancy, which is there was a substantial impact if students made this different choice, because we honored that, if I'm in full transparency. So it's not intended to change, but if those requests come in, we'll look at those and evaluate those accordingly. Any other questions about the opt-out?
And there's no more chance for students to change anything in the past semesters.
Correct. Yep.
All right.
We have sundowned those past semesters. I still get requests periodically.
People ask still, yeah.
They always ask, and that's fine. You can always ask, but yeah, those opportunities have passed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. This is on the ARP reversal request form. It's mostly true, but we warn students that are submitting the reversal that the reversal requests are for processing only and no further review will be done. and opt-out requests cannot be reversed. Now, I say that, and then there's some weird things that came into those reversals, and I was like, oh, you don't really want to reverse. Let's talk about this and get the advisor involved. And usually it was a student that an advisor had not recommended that they reverse. They just maybe had some kind of like buyer's remorse or something. So we try to protect students as much as we can, but there is that disclaimer there that the reversal requests are really intended just for processing only, not necessarily for additional review. Okay, so after the May 26th ARP deadline, when UNC Genie goes back to normal and students can't make any other selections, just sort of some updates about what's next. So the registrar's office will continue to make updates to students' records on a rolling basis based on what happens in those ARP exception or reversal options. We always talk about this. Our selection's really final, yes, but just remember that our normal course withdrawal request, retroactive course withdrawal request process still exists and allows students up to 1 year to appeal. And the ARP exception request will remain open probably until August 1. That's the deadline that we're putting out there right now. This is really intended for students that have grade appeals going on that may not be resolved in that 2-week ARP deadline timeframe or other administrative processes. My general request is that if you've got students who, so this is not reversals, but essentially they didn't opt in and should have or want to now because something has changed. If you'll just direct them to the student's first office directly, and we'll vet those and figure out what's the best option for students. We really tried to limit the exceptions, which were essentially requests to opt in outside of UNC Genie, outside of that 2-week window when students could do it themselves. But there's always exceptions, and that's why we got the exception request. So that will continue to exist. As a reminder, again, on June 1, academic standing will be rerun by the registrar's office and notifications will be sent again to any students who have returned from academic good standing, so have had a substantial change in their standing from the final grade deadline to the end of ARP. And will always, as they usually do, go to students on, that should also say warning, but warning, academic probation, suspension, or dismissal, with more concrete guidance for appeal options moving forward. And then June 17th is when the appeals committee will meet. So if you're working with any kind of student on academic suspension or dismissal, their appeals are due on June 10th, but the committee, I think, will meet on the 17th, and those decisions will be sent same day. I suspect that Adam or others may ask questions about summer enrollment. Students will continue again to be allowed, particularly to enroll in summer 1. If they are placed on suspension and dismissal, but enrolled in summer 2, they'll need to adjust their schedule accordingly, depending on the outcome of their academic appeal. And we'll work with students on that. Summer gets real messy. It was messy last summer too, because generally students who are ineligible to enroll aren't allowed to enroll in summer, but ARP makes that extra tricky. And so we're working with those students on a case-by-case basis. So if you've got questions about that, just let me know. And hopefully I didn't muddy the waters too much there. I think that's everything, guys. Questions, things we haven't talked about today that we should.
Dana, would you, for a student that's going to bomb out their whole schedule, like 4 Fs, would you recommend them to do 2 US and then do the appeal, or should they do the appeals because WEs are better than US grades? Or would the US be convertible to a WE if they appealed and got all those approved? Just curious how you'd navigate that situation.
Yeah, good question. So essentially a student who has more than 2 Fs F's on all of their courses that they're enrolled in, which are more than 2 is what I'm hearing. So in that scenario, and others feel free to chime in as well, but I would recommend opting into the US grades where they can, preferably not for repeat F's. So since those are excluded from GPA calculation anyway, if they earned an F in the same course multiple times. But to opt into the US grades where they can, to consider a course retroactive course withdrawal request if there have been some kind of extenuating circumstances, and to submit a suspension or dismissal appeal if they've been placed on academic suspension. So kind of the trifecta is what I would recommend if they're really sure that they want to continue their enrollment. Is the other caveat that I would say. I mean, I think the US grade combined with course withdrawal requests is something that I would recommend regardless. But generally speaking, what we are seeing anecdotally is that the students that struggled in spring 2020 but were saved by the ARP continued to struggle in fall 2020 and may continue to struggle in spring 2021. And at some point, multiple consecutive semesters of nothing but withdrawals or US grades has its own impact, financial aid wise, academic progress wise, and otherwise. So that's a different conversation, but one that I would still encourage advisors to have as they're helping students navigate sort of short and long term.
Thanks.
Hopefully that helps.
Yep.
Let's see, I got a chat. My chat window is back up. Looks like Whitney was sort of echoing or providing some feedback to Adam's same question. Any other questions, caveats, things we should think about collectively?
With the repeat Fs, I know that doesn't factor into the cumulative GPA. That's not excluded though in term GPA if they're on probation, or is it? So does that, it can't hit them cumulatively, but does it have punitive impacts to their term GPA if they're probation versus suspension?
I'm sort of second guessing myself off the top of my head, so others feel free to chime in, but I believe that excluded Fs are excluded from both term and cumulative GPA.
Yeah, that's right.
I have a question too about just the way to manage this proactive advising process. So if we have some 9-month faculty advisors who would not be working essentially as far as advising after the academic year, I guess this is where we'll have to strategize within our school about how to manage fitting into this, or do you have some suggestions?
Yeah, I definitely think starting with your school would be my first suggestion, but I'm happy to be involved in those conversations, or, you know, to talk through what other options might be as well. I know that I appreciate that that's a complexity, but I would definitely start with the advising center within your school or college.
Okay, thank you.
Dana, it's Nancy again.
Yeah.
The information you're going to share in Box, I know you would include grades of C and lower. Will it show all of the students' grades so that we see it in context, or will it just show that they have a C in this course or they have a F in this course, or will it say that like they were in 4 courses and these are all of their grades?
Right, that's a good question. I think I was thinking through that when a comment was made earlier and wrote down a note to think about it a little longer later. But the original plan was to include only C grades and below, but I appreciate that that only gives you part of the picture. So maybe it is better. I'm open to feedback from the group to essentially just have full grade rosters. Now that's a lot more information to sort of filter through. I'm
I'd
open
be
to your thoughts
inclined,
on that.
but we already, it's Caitlin. We already have to pull up their transcripts usually anyway to be able to figure out like 67% completion and all of
Right.
that sort of stuff. So I would rather see a smaller spreadsheet and have to pull each student up individually, but that's just me and my dislike of spreadsheets.
You're so good at the spreadsheets though, Caitlin. I've seen your spreadsheet magic.
Caitlin, I live for your spreadsheets. I don't know what you're talking about. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's why I dislike them. I spend too much time with them.
I was just wondering about, it seems like the fastest way to get, I mean, I'm thinking about the scope of the college and how we're going to get grades in on the 10th and try to get proactive, trying to get out in front of students who, you know, to contact who really need to do it. And like, we might say, you know, you've got Fs and you need to get these off your transcript. But if we do that and they also have, I guess they would show up multiple times for multiple low grades. So maybe we'd be able to tailor a mass message so that I'm afraid that if we send out very generic general advice that we could be sending the wrong advice to students in particular situations. But I agree with Caitlin, but we're probably going to have to look at the transcript anyway before we can.
Anyway, yeah. Okay.
And maybe what we do if things are tricky, just say we think you should. Maybe we need to. Well, I'll work with Caitlin on it, but I think what we might have to be careful about sending too general message to too many students because we could get the wrong message out.
Yeah. So it sounds like maybe stick with the original plan of knowing that our goal is students who would benefit most, and those students who benefit most are the ones with C grades in bad standing, for lack of a better phrase, or C- grades and below who would benefit from SA grades or the protection of the US on their GPA. So sticking with that original plan.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, everybody. So just a reminder of my contact information. If you've got questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. Again, everything we've talked about today, including the links and the PowerPoint to various things, will be available by the end of the week. I've also put the Students First Office general email there because the team is well versed in academic relief package things and are happy to answer questions that you've got about individual students that you're working with. Don't hesitate to reach out. If there are things that we need to switch up on the fly, particularly as we sort of shift back towards this more proactive advising, don't hesitate to reach out about that as well. And we'll get this last academic relief package semester put to rest. Any other thoughts, comments, questions before we wrap up today? All right, everybody. Well, I'm betting I will see many of you back here tomorrow morning for our MAC town hall for advisors to talk about many updates that have gone on behind the scenes with our new general education program and preparing for the launch of that in the fall. I'll see you tomorrow morning. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great day.